Welcome to the Ultimate Gamer Podcast, a show that features conversations with the trailblazers, thought leaders, decision makers, and investors who are defining the gaming and esports space. On the Ultimate Gamer Podcast, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and esports a global phenomenon. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game and connector to the esports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up Podcast presented by the Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Chris Chaney, founder and CEO of C4 Plus, a global venture studio and investment company committed to entrepreneurship and focused on sports, entertainment, esports, and gaming. Once Chris discovered the gaming and esports industry, he went all in with his first major venture and investment in definitive gaming org, Infinite Esports and Entertainment, which, as we learn on the pod, was originally going to be called Legacy. We rewound our conversation and discussion to his education at Princeton, where he started a sports business conference, a charity basketball tournament, and numerous experiences that gave him his first exposure to organizing and operating events. That exposure led him to the NBA, as well as his first startup company, which was a basketball, lifestyle, and apparel brand. In 2016, he and a friend stumbled across esports and Riot Games, when Chris wasn't even sure what Riot or League of Legends was. But that lit a fire. A year later, after the initial vision of Project X and Legacy, Infinite Esports and Entertainment was born. Infinite was acquired by Immortals in 2019, and he has been investing in gaming esports startups ever since and advising founders about the market. He's driven by the process and a burning passion to make a difference in the industry. Please join me now for Chris Chaney.
I moved here about 6.5, going on 7 years now ago. So I was in Germany before then, which is home for me.
Okay.
I had originally come to the U.S. for the first time when I studied here for college. Okay. And grew up in Germany. I was born and raised, all of that, all my schooling, and then did college here. Worked at the NBA in New York.
Yeah, but before you jump out of that, man, I got to ask you because I spent a lot of time traveling and stuff. Fa Shing, bro.
Yeah,
I did.
You like that?
Yeah, and I did it in Munich. I didn't even know what I was getting involved in. Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the Hof. We went to the Hofbrauhaus, and I can't remember what's the name of the street. What's the street? The main street there.
Now you got me. So my sister used to work in Munich a while ago. So I am from southern Germany, not quite as far south as Munich. That's all the way in southern Germany. I'm from the Würzburg area. Okay. That's where Dirk Nowitzki is from. He's probably the most well-known person.
He's pretty well known.
My area. So. Yeah, fair. I mean, and given that I'm in Dallas now, of course, he's a massive celebrity here.
Exactly.
People love him. Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, Germany is great. Really good quality of life, and it's right in essentially in the middle of Europe, which does make traveling really easy. But I wanted to come to the U.S. for college, and had the opportunity to do that, and that's where I actually got introduced to the business of sports. And so my career initially started in the sports industry, in what you'd call traditional sports, specifically in basketball at the NBA. And I left the league because I wanted to start my own company. And the NBA is a large organization. So for someone right out of college, there aren't necessarily opportunities to really build things. Because of just the structure and the way the league works, and so I really wanted to build something. I really wanted to be entrepreneurial, so I left, and that's how I wanted to do sports marketing, events, consulting, again in traditional sports and basketball, soccer. But ultimately, I found my way, and this really wasn't necessarily planned, but I found my way into what I would call is non-traditional sports. Think mixed martial arts, think action sports, fitness, CrossFit, rugby, a lot of the fringe or more nascent sports that, in some cases, mixed martial arts being one, have exploded in recent years. And so I ended up working with a number of companies on business development, strategic partnerships, and fundraising. So I had some really good experiences seeing these spaces grow. Again, action sports, mixed martial arts, rugby, and so forth. And that's ultimately what actually led me to esports, because I discovered the space 4.5 years or so ago, really by accident. And looking esports. I mean, I didn't know esports, but I just fell into it, and I fell in love with it. And what I saw was a space that had some similarities to traditional sports, which
Mm-hmm.
is again my original background, if you will, but it also had similarities to non-traditional sports in terms of the structure, some of the challenges, a very passionate, vibrant community. Think about the CrossFit community, right? That's a very passionate, very vibrant community, and at the same time, it's very fragmented. And esports is, similar, very fragmented, very passionate, very vibrant, very global. And so I saw similarities from both traditional and non-traditional sports, and I felt that there was white space to get into esports and build something. Simply put, I wanted to build something,
Right.
which is what I had set out to do after I left the NBA, to
Right.
build something. And here I was again years later, discovering esports and deciding I wanted to dive headfirst into the space, meet a lot of great people, and build something in the industry.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned fragmented, because when I went to the Miami Dolphins, when I left the travel industry and went into the traditional pro sports and worked for the Miami Dolphins, that was one of the things I looked at, what Wayne Huizenga had done. And Wayne had basically brought three different industries together that were, mom and pop were fragmented industries. So the waste management industry was fragmented. He kind of brought that together under one roof. And then Blockbuster, which was all the mom and pop, movie shops
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. And then he did something similar with AutoNation. And so I kind of like what you're saying. I looked at esports the same way. I said, first of all, it's very young. It's very mature still and nascent, but it's there's a community there, but there's obviously a lot of fragmentation, and there's an opportunity to bring that community together. I love that you said that, because I completely agree with you, and I can see some of the things you're doing. Can you walk me back to like when you were at Princeton? So when you were at Princeton, were you studying for traditional sports management at that time?
No, so Princeton is fairly traditional, to keep using traditional, not non-traditional, fairly traditional, maybe even some may say conservative when it comes to your choice of majors. At least at the time, there were very limited options. There wasn't even a business major or a business management major, certainly no sports management program or sports business program. So I actually majored in sociology with a minor in African American studies, and technically it's called a certificate. But no, that was the business of sports was entirely an extracurricular pursuit for me. On the
Okay.
academic side, it was sociology with a blend of history and politics and anthropology even mixed into it, and African American studies. But separately, out of the classroom, I was focused on sports, and I was manager for a men's basketball team for 3 seasons, which was also an opportunity to look beyond the sidelines, because I wasn't playing, but I was part of the team from an organizational perspective. I ran an annual sports business conference that brought leaders, sports executives onto campus to share their wisdom, to share their experiences, in building their careers. That turned out to be a nonprofit organization that I ran for essentially 10 years. That was a lot of fun. I ran an annual basketball tournament, a charity basketball tournament on campus. Did a bunch of events actually, just generally. So for me, it was just about, college was this amazing opportunity to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And academics are great, but for me, it was everything outside of the classroom that I really loved doing, a lot of which around events and getting new projects off the ground, getting involved in various student groups and activities. But that was my first exposure to the business of sports, running events, working with the men's basketball team, and then being fortunate enough to also get some cool internship experiences.
Yeah, and that's I love about college as well. And I'm thinking about my kids are 14, 11 soon. We got to think about college, and real world experience along with theoretical learning to me is like a great combination. It gives you that chance to kind of grow up and figure some things out. And like you said, actually try a number of different things, whether it's an internship or building something yourself. And then you said you jumped in the NBA, and it sounds like you worked on the NBA side, not like a specific team.
Correct.
So
League office.
And in the NBA side, you said something again that resonated very, very distinctly with me. And that's that one of the reasons I left the Miami Marlins, and one of the reasons I believe, and I know Chris Overholt, who's up at the Toronto Defiant and works with Overactive Media, and a number of other executives that were in traditional sports and then left traditional sports to go into esports. And you mentioned something that I again resonates very closely with me, and that's that you felt going into esports that you could make a bigger difference, right? The NBA has been around for a long time. So to really get involved in the NBA and change things or make a big difference, it's a little bit more challenging than it is in esports right now, where they need people like yourself. So talk to me a little bit about your NBA experience, and then that's going to lead us into, because I mean, there's just so much that you're doing right now. So we'll then jump into some of the projects and things that you've invested in recently. But that experience on the NBA side, how did that help you then looking at esports and gaming?
Yeah, so when I got to the NBA, I was deeply immersed in basketball across the board. I mentioned I was manager of our basketball team in college.
Do you play? Are you a player?
I played in high school, and
right.
I mean, my game growing up was a 3-on-3 basketball, which is now an Olympic sport, as I'm sure you've followed. So I always believed that 3-on-3 basketball was the future of the sport.
Right.
It's such an intense, compact version of the game. I think it had. I mean, it doesn't. Certainly because the floor is smaller, it's half court, and you're not going to run as many plays. But I think in terms of this action-packed entertainment product, I think 3-on-3 is almost a better product than 5-on-5 basketball. But anyways, that's a different story.
But I like that because when you look at different games like football, there's different variations of football too. There's the Arena Football League, so you can see that there's flag football now. So.
And if you look at not to digress, but if you actually look at some of these emerging sports, what I would consider emerging sports or second tier sports, cricket and rugby are two really good examples. Well, the two versions of cricket and rugby that are growing are rugby sevens, which is a more compact version of the game. It's 7-on-7 versus 15-on-15, and it's also a shorter. The games are shorter themselves. And then there's T20 or 2020 cricket, which is also a shorter version of cricket that compresses the format. And I don't know all the cricket rules, but it's like a sevens version. A rugby sevens version of cricket. So it's interesting that you're already starting to see some of these short format games or variations of games that are experiencing some of the fastest growth. But so when I got to the NBA, I was already deeply immersed in basketball. My first startup in college was actually a basketball lifestyle apparel brand that I started and won some money in a business plan contest on campus. I was running basketball tournaments on campus. I was interning. One summer I was interning for the New York Knicks. Another summer I was with the basketball magazines. I was on the publication side, on the print media side. And then I also had an opportunity to work the NBA draft as well. So basketball was my world.
Right.
And so I got to the NBA because it felt like the natural progression of all the things that I was doing previously. And for someone who's really entrepreneurially minded, it was a great learning experience that you can't really come into a large multi-billion-dollar organization and expect to have a significant impact. And for me, that was very frustrating. And of course, you're a bright-eyed kid just graduating from college, and the world should be at your feet, and you find that it's not. And so there's a bit of a reality check, and of course, a lack of maturity. I had this work ethic, I had this drive, and the same that I think I still have today, but I didn't feel that I could really put it to work, put it to use. And I was in the
Maximize
global,
it, optimize it.
exactly. I was in the group that was managing some of the NBA's global partnerships. Nike had a chance to fly out to Beaverton, Oregon, and visit Nike's campus, which was an amazing, amazing experience. Again, as a kid, just a few months out of college, out of
Right.
undergrad, and I worked on the Coca-Cola relationship, the Anheuser-Busch relationship, and so from that perspective, it was super interesting. But there was just something really missing for me, so I left because I wanted to build something. I wanted to work on multiple different projects and not be really confined by a large-scale organization. And that's when I started my sports consulting, sports marketing firm, and I really haven't looked back since.
Right.
That was the only job I've had since graduating college, aside from the jobs that I create for myself
Right.
in my own companies. That was the only job I had, and it lasted less than a year.
Right.
But I think I'm better for it. And what I think, when I was in college and when graduation was coming up, or the decision at least to figure out what I was going to do, working at the NBA felt like that straight path that I needed to take. Given everything I had done before, it seemed like a natural progression.
Mhm.
Internships and basketball team stuff and events. And of course, you work at the NBA. It was so obvious.
Mhm.
But I think if I had maybe given myself an opportunity to sort of push some of that to the side and just think about what drives me and what I had already done, which was very entrepreneurial, maybe I would have chosen a different path, because I did have another offer with a startup, really early stage, 3 or 4 people, that was funded and that was really keen on me coming on board.
Mhm.
But I decided to take that seemingly straight path of working at the NBA. And so, again, I mean, hindsight is what it is,
Right.
but I think that is such a critical junction to pause, right? Just to pause and reflect and really think about what is that right next move and what makes the most sense.
Right.
And so, for me, it worked out fine, and it was great. I think I could have had a bigger impact at a smaller, more nimble organization. But of course, the NBA is always something that's part of my background and part of my overall experiences. But to your point from earlier, college is this great opportunity to explore, to fail, quite frankly, right? To fail at some things, to fail forward, hopefully,
Yep.
and to start, accumulating some experiences, to then take that, and embark on that, journey of career and the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well,
So
the thing you said is, kind of, you didn't take that time. At least you don't think you did. Maybe you did. Maybe you actually spent a little bit more time thinking about it than you might have thought. But that NBA experience opportunity and then the startup opportunity, I find myself connecting with you there, because when I left the travel industry and sold my business, I had an opportunity. I interviewed in a number of different areas, and I was looking at both money and quality of life. And I was looking, okay, I want to get involved in traditional pro sports because I had a sport management background. I'm an athlete. And so the Dolphins were the sexier play for me. I had another opportunity with it was a company that is basically in the mortgage industry. It was subprime mortgages, where I had friends that were working there that were making really good money. And so I had interviews at both. I got both offers. The mortgage company offered me probably 2.5 times the salary that the Dolphins did. But I went with the Dolphins. I went with the Dolphins because for me, it was more fun. It was sexier. It was a quality of life. And so I look at what your decision was at the time, and you're, like you said, hindsight, but at the NBA might have been calling you, man. It might have been like, like that's the sexier, I'm working at the NBA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember when I got my business cards and, my name and at NBA.com email address and the NBA logo on it. And I thought, wow. But when I left, I thought also, wow, that's really not that important. I mean, when I was there in that moment, picking up the card, I thought, I'm on top of the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when I left, I thought, well, I don't need all of that.
Yeah.
I just need an opportunity to build something.
That's one of the things I say. And again, that's why it's sexier, like to the outside, to somebody looking at, because I've been in traditional pro sports for over a decade. And you say you work for the Dolphins or the Marlins, and there aren't that many people that work in pro sports, and the branding is massive, right? I mean, people know whether you work for the Dolphins or the Cowboys, or and that's where esports is kind of going now too. But so you're right. If a perfect example is if I pick up the phone and I was just working for startup company A that you were working for, right? And you tried to get a hold of somebody and you said, hey, I'm Chris Chaney and I work for startup company A. They're like, okay. And you're going to go through all this different, trying to convince them that they should have a conversation with you. If you say, hey, I'm Chris Chaney from the NBA, okay, well, we'll take your call. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is something to be
said.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. But I agree with you 100% once again. And that's once you get behind the curtain and you work at the organizations, it's really just another company. And it's a business. It's a business. Like when I first went in, I thought, hey, this is just going to be all fun. I'm going to be at games on the weekends. And no, man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So, so cool. So now we're getting into, you start your own company and you start looking at esports in 2016, and you see this as a great opportunity and really a canvas for you to do what you want, right? You have an opportunity to do what you want. So run me through that a little bit. Like what was going through your mind and what then came across your plate that you're like, okay, I'm seeing this. Wait, this is the thing I really want to do.
Sure. Well, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, just catching up, and we kind of stumbled upon the topic of esports. I had heard about it, he had heard about it, and so we were just chatting about what we knew at the time, which was basically zero about esports. And he said,
"Were you a gamer? Were you a gamer going in?"
No, I can't say I was. No,
Okay.
I mean, everyone's played some games growing up, right? Sega Mega Drive and Game Gear and whatnot. But no, I couldn't. World of Warcraft, actually, Warcraft 2 was one of the first games that I played pretty religiously a long time ago. But so I wasn't a gamer at the time, and so we're chatting about things, and esports came up, and he said, well, I should introduce you to a friend of mine who works at Riot Games. And I said, oh, Riot Games, I've never heard of Riot Games. And he said, and my friend, he works on, he's a product manager, I think it was, for League of Legends. And I said, oh, what's League of Legends?
Right.
And I thought, well, that's both sound really interesting, right? Games, League of Legends. I'd be happy. I'd love to have a conversation. And that set off just this wild journey of dozens probably of conversations, because once I got on the phone with one person, including his friend at Riot, who's still at Riot, which is pretty cool, years later, I just reached out to anyone and everyone I could find, a lot through LinkedIn, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, now it's really difficult because I think LinkedIn has become quite flooded with people that have esports in their profiles, extremely flooded, actually. But in 2016, I could type in esports into the LinkedIn search box, and I really only found people that were working in the space,
Mm-hmm.
that were working at teams, that were possibly doing some agency work, that were on the startup side, and I reached out to again, dozens of them, and I think I heard back from everyone, and we got on the phone, and I just ask them some simple questions about the space, and their views on it, and what they were doing in esports, and so I started forming my own thoughts as I was asking questions, learning from others about their experiences and work. I started to form my own thoughts around esports and what the opportunity might be, and that led me to wanting to start essentially, it was called Project X at the time, and it was essentially an incubator investment firm.
Okay.
Basically, I wanted to, one, put Dallas on the map again, I should say, because it was at one point and an integral part of the North American esports scene, maybe the hub of the North American esports scene. And so I wanted to put Dallas on the map again. So establishing some kind of physical space. I called it House of Esports. Pretty lame, but having a
told you what it
physical
was.
space, yeah, exactly, a physical space that would have maybe a merchandise shop on the ground floor, you know, an esports merch shop. So I was interested in doing something on the apparel side, and then on the other floors we would have office space for startups, and then also room for a team, because I felt that having a pro esports organization would be key to this Project X. And so the thinking was essentially threefold. One, own and operate pro esports organizations, or one pro esports organization.
Mm-hmm.
Two, invest in startups, esports and gaming startups. And then three, also launch our own esports and gaming startups, and put that all under one umbrella, which again was just called Project X, which more of a placeholder than a final name, and then also have a physical space for those three verticals, or those three sides of the business. And so that was the initial version of the project. So teams for me were one of the pillars, but one of three pillars, because the other two were startups, both investing and incubating or launching. And you know, as I started having conversations with investors and potential partners, the idea started to get refined. You know, I started to make some changes, adjustments, and it ultimately became Legacy Esports and Entertainment, which then launched as Infinite Esports and Entertainment.
Right.
We, at the very last minute, changed the name from Legacy Esports to Infinite Esports, because we discovered that there's an Australian esports organization called Legacy Esports, and we figured there's no need to create any potential confusion, you know?
Right.
And so we launched as Infinite Esports, and what Infinite ultimately was very different from Project X. Project X was really a startup hub that had a team as a catalyst, you know, as one of the pillars. Infinite was more of a holdings company for teams, for esports organizations, while at the same time having a second pillar of founding or incubating startups.
Okay.
But the focus had certainly shifted on the team side, even though for me it was very important and still critical that we invest a lot on the startup side.
Mhm.
So now teams were one of two pillars versus one of three previously. As we launched the business in September of 2017, so a year after I started really digging into the space, and almost a year and a half after the original version 1 of Project X,
Mhm.
Infinite Esports was born.
Right.
We secured investment. We were able to get a deal done with a team called Optic Gaming, and we were off the ground.
And Chris,
And
Chris, when you say we, who's we?
so when I started Project X, it was initially just me, and I started just bringing in more people, like-minded people that believed in the vision, and that became part of this original founding team.
Okay.
There are some people part of it early on that kind of dropped off, then other people came in, just as you would expect.
Right.
But ultimately, there was a small founding team, including myself, that was driving this project, which turned from Project X to Legacy Esports to Infinite Esports
Yeah,
in
I
its
just know how
launch form.
some of the things that I've heard you talk about and read in some of the articles is I know how important people are to you. I know that you say people first, and so to surround
Absolutely.
yourself with other like-minded people that all have a similar vision and a goal and
Yes,
objective getting into the space must have been very important to you. And I'm sure that's evolved over time, like you
absolutely.
said. But yeah, I
Mhm.
thought that was probably pretty important. So now
Yeah.
Optic is under your umbrella,
hmm hmm
and then
Yeah.
where?
So
Yeah.
so we launched in September, had a phenomenal team on board, great founding team. I was really grateful for the folks that bought into the vision, even months and months before we had a dollar of funding,
Right.
that bought into it and that got behind it. And then we were launched, and we had Optic. We secured a slot in the Overwatch League. We secured a slot in what was then the NALCS and is now the LCS.
Mhm.
And we were off to the races. And and our focus started to shift towards the teams business or the org business, where most of the oxygen, if you will, was taken up by the esports orgs. And that's obviously, if you look at a lot of groups out there today, esports orgs are their focal point. They don't do anything in the startup world, or maybe very little in the startup world. For me, it was always important to have this counterweight, startups and entrepreneurship counterweight to esports orgs, and a business that's becoming more like traditional sports. So it was important for me to have that balance, but we shifted more and more towards teams because they just need so much attention, so much focus, so much capital, and I think we kind of didn't quite allocate. In my mind, we didn't allocate enough resources to the startup side, and so things really shifted towards teams. We had a lot of success launching the Houston Outlaws in the Overwatch League. I would confidently say that we were the most popular team in season 1. And I know for a fact, in terms of merchandise sales, we were the #1 team. And our social media growth was through the charts across all of our channels.
I
We
love
had
that
a,
you're saying that because I had Markel Lee on I think a couple of weeks
well,
ago, and he was saying that was one of his absolute favorite exercises and projects that he was involved with was the Houston
absolutely.
Outlaws. Yeah.
Absolutely. He and his team did a phenomenal job. I really think it should be one of the esports case studies in terms of building a brand and growing a brand. And also a brand that was confined by the fact that it was just an Overwatch League franchise, right? We
Right.
couldn't start picking up a CSGO team or a bunch of Dota streamers or something like that, right? Like we were confined to Overwatch League. And within that, we absolutely maximized, I think, that opportunity. So we launched the Houston Outlaws. We kicked off season 1 for the revamped NALCS. We were competing in a bunch of other games. And we also picked up 2 additional brands. One was called Allegiance or Team Allegiance,
Mm-hmm.
and Allegiance was our. We were looking to reposition it as our family-friendly, mobile-first brand. I felt this was 2017, 18. I felt that mobile esports had tremendous long-term potential,
Right.
and you could already see the growth in Asia, Southeast Asia, and China. And so I think to authentically build a mobile esports brand, you you have to be really committed to that. And so Allegiance was going to be our more family friendly, mobile first esports org. So we were building that. We acquired it and we were pushing it in that direction. So we were in Arena of Valor, for example, AOV. We were the #1 team in North America. We were just destroying the competition.
Right.
That was great. We were also in Rocket League. Again, it's sort of more family friendly title. And we were looking at some other games as well. And then we picked up Obey Alliance. And Obey Alliance was the goal was to make that our content first esports organization
Mm-hmm.
with relatively minimal esports exposure, meaning on the competitive side. So not 5, 10 different teams in various games, but having 1 or 2 esports teams and the rest just content. And maybe at some point, no esports teams at all, and just be a fully content focused org. So we picked up those 2, and we felt like, we had this great basket or portfolio of brands, and but the team brands or the team orgs, they were just our focus. And so we shifted more and more towards that. But I really wanted us to also stay committed to startups, because I think startups in many ways form the lifeblood of an industry. Whether it's in tech and any other industries, it's the startups that drive the change, that drive the innovation, right? That really become meaningful, from small startup to meaningful player to high impact company. And so I, ultimately we had some internal discussions, and my partners wanted to take it really completely in the team direction, and it was important for me to again have that balance. And so we ultimately made the decision, or they made the decision, to move it all on the team side and not do startups anymore. And that really wasn't where I wanted to take the organization. And so, we decided that, they can take it in that direction. I'll focus on some other projects that I'm doing, and I'll step away from the organization. And then subsequently, the company was sold. The entire business, right? Our entire holdco was sold as a result. And for me, when I set out to do something, I think you stay the course, even if you face headwinds. You make small pivots, of course. You always make small pivots, right? Small course adjustments. But if you go left, you don't all of a sudden just go, strong right. Like that's a completely different course. You might go left, left, and then you just go left, and then you go left, 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 right? But you're still going left.
Right.
And that's the general direction. And so for me to go from right to then steer all the way left, that's not what I'd set out to do, and that's not the vision that that we had as a management team and as a founding team. So the decision was not easy, but I needed to stay true to what we were building, and so I left, and the company changed course to go left, and that was it ultimately resulted in the company being sold, which part of that steering it left was to ready a potential sale, ready a sale of the company. And we had some internal challenges around putting all these assets under one hat or all these companies under one hat, that's difficult. Those I consider startup challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you take an organization or you take a group of people and everyone's wearing different hats and you look to create some cohesion and have everyone pulling in the same direction and maximize that opportunity. There's challenges with that, and we face plenty. I think we had a lot of wins in a short period of time, and I wish we would have stayed the course for at least another year. Kept pushing through for at least another year. But we made, or a year and a half. But we made you know significant changes, and to me those weren't in line with what I wanted to build. And so I think now it's a year since we sold the company, exactly a year actually. And everyone I've spoken with, I think, is in a good spot. They're onto new opportunities, and some people are still with the company that we sold. But it was this phenomenally ambitious project that we were undertaking, which started with a PowerPoint presentation that I still have, a few slides, called Project X, and which turned into this, according to Forbes, one of the most valuable esports companies in the world.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, when you think about, it's like your child, right? You see the birth of this, and then you saw it grow and into a place where a lot of people. Now, this wasn't your mindset at the time, but a lot of people would look at that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are getting involved in this business right now, right? That are, hey, let's start something, and then let's flip it in like 2 or 3 years. Right, where they and that wasn't your goal, but a lot of people would look at that and say, "Wow, Chris, that's amazing that you were able to do that." And I think you brought up one other point, I want you to share on that. But the challenge with these orgs today in esports is maybe multifold, comparatively speaking, to just a traditional sports team, because a traditional sports team, again, has one team under its umbrella, and it's a challenge enough to grow your fan base, to become competitive, whether you're talking one of the major leagues or even like a PLL, like the lacrosse league. And that's one team. And like you were saying, you have multiple teams underneath one org. So I could see where that could be challenging even in-house, where, maybe this team over here, like you said, was at your, you didn't say Valorant. What was one of your mobile teams again?
Legions.
Yeah, so Legion. So, but there was, so they had a couple. You had a couple different mobile teams out there, right? And so one of them is doing extremely well, and so you could see where more resources might be put towards something like that. Where if the other one is, whether it's in last place or it's just not performing the same, then all of these. So if that's happening internally, that's got to be a challenge.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think to me, it was, we had this blank canvas. We filled it with really incredible people, threw in a mix of different assets and things we were doing and projects, and we were sorting it. We were kind of going through, okay, this goes over here, this goes over there, these people go here, these people go there. And so it was really starting to take shape in my mind, but it was a very blank canvas with a lot of different things thrown onto it, and we sometimes were adding more things. But to me, the figuring it out part and the working with great people to figure it out, that's a lot of fun. And I think we had a lot of success doing that. But startups are hard. If they were easy, everyone would be doing startups, right? And building the next Facebook or Instagram or something. If that was remotely easy, we'd have 1,000 of them, but we have one, we have two. And so that challenge to me is, I enjoy that. And working with people that share similar vision and similar ambitions to build something really special, to build something really unique. and to do so long term. To your point from a couple minutes ago, for me it was important that we're building this for 5, 7, 10 years, right? Not for 24 months or 36 months. That feels short-sighted to me, but you also you respond to the market as well, right? So you don't just say, well, I want to build it for 10 years, and then you never look up. You just look up 10 years later. You can't do that either.
Right.
But philosophically, for me, it was important that we were building this for the long haul, and to do that is super hard, super challenging, but that's the only way to do it, right? I think it's the only way to do it. I don't like building things that, that are just meant to last for a short period of time. You build them to last a long period of time. If you fall short, that's fine. But philosophically and in terms of the intentions and how you set it out to build it for many years. The PLL, you mentioned the Premier League lacrosse, they're not building this for a 2-year flip. I don't believe that. I think they want to build an incredibly sustainable outdoor lacrosse league that will be around 25 years from now, and that the founders, Paul and his brother and everyone else involved can look back at and be proud of what they've built. If there's an opportunity to exit 24 months down the road, I'm sure they'd consider it, but I firmly believe that's not what they set out to do when they launched the league.
No,
And so
they have
similarly
such
for me.
they have such a passion. Paul's got such a passion for the game. I met him. He's one of the reasons I'm in esports today, but met him like 3 years ago, and he's such a great content creator. And just he and his brother are brilliant, and they left Major League Lacrosse because I think they saw an opportunity for what they thought they could do better and be more meaningful, I think, for the players especially. The fan base obviously as well, because it always is about the fans, but the players and what they could do with the players. And it's incredible what they've done in a short amount of time. And I agree with you. I think it's something that they'll be involved with for 25, 50 years, and then there'll be a legacy there. They'll want to leave it, and they'll want it to be like the NFL and the NBA 100 years later. So talk to me a little bit about your strategy now. So after Infinite, you left, and that's in time frame wise, we're looking at late 2018.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay. And your strategy leaving there, and because now you're involved and you're investing and advising in a lot of different projects. So how do you determine what you want to get involved with? And then I have a little bit of an idea of that, but then how do people find you, or how do you find the projects? Because I know you're what you're looking for to some degree in a founder, but a founder's got to be like, okay, well, what can I show Chris? You know what I mean? That is going to interest him. And I want you to kind of broad strokes on that, and then maybe pick a couple of the, and I've got a couple listed just because I know Patrick Mahoney at We Are Nations, and I know Markel at AOE Creative, and I know you're involved in some of those. So broad strokes, and then maybe dive into one or two of those and kind of share with us the process.
Yeah. So I get a lot of inquiries on LinkedIn. I'm actually pretty accessible on there, and I definitely make an effort to get back to everyone, even if it's a no thanks, I'm not interested. At least I respond, right, and let people know if I'm interested or not.
That's great, by the way.
Sometimes sometimes getting a no, I think, as a founder or as an executive is better than not getting a response. Then
100%.
At least you can, check the box. So LinkedIn is great. Obviously, getting introduced. I was just actually introduced before we hopped on to someone through a good colleague of mine, a friend of mine, who introduced me to another colleague of his that's raising capital in esports for a startup, an esports startup. It's not a team, an esports startup. And so I obviously love getting those as well. But I'm super open to cold outreaches on LinkedIn as well, or via email. My email address is not hard to guess. And I make an effort to respond. Now, what stands out when someone reaches out. So if someone reaches out cold, I definitely look at the tone of the email, the delivery, or the message, email or LinkedIn message. I look at the tone of the text. I look at how are they quote unquote selling themselves and selling what they're building. And again, selling in quotation marks. You're pitching, right? But that's selling.
Yep.
And then what's the call to action? Is it, hey, I want you to invest, or I'd love 15 minutes of your time and tell you some more about the exciting things we're doing. I think you really would, you would have an interest. I mean, I've gotten some messages that were almost too direct,
Right.
as in make a decision right now to invest based on 3 lines of text, and then others
That's
that were,
hilarious.
here's what we're doing, and I think you'd really enjoy hearing about it, and if I can bend your ear for 15 minutes, I won't disappoint. Or, like what's the tone, what's the
Right.
messaging, what's the sale, or the delivery, the pitch, and then of course, what are they building? That's really important, and if I believe, and that's just my entirely subjective opinion, whether I believe in the opportunity and the kind of product that they're working on. And then of course I click on their profile to see what have they done previously, what are they doing currently, is to start up a new project, have they been working on it for 10 years without any traction, and who are some of our mutual connections? There usually are a bunch. And so I look at all those things, and then I'll respond, happy to chat. Here's my email address, reach out, let's schedule a call. And then we hop on, and they might do a screen share or send a presentation in advance. And then I ask a bunch of questions. And then it's super standard in terms of a sale or a pitch presentation. But initially, I really look at what's the delivery, what's the tone of the text, what's the confidence, how are they approaching me, and how does that, what does that make me think about them as a potential founder, or a founder that, not a potential founder, but a potential founder that I would invest in,
Right.
whether it's my time or my capital. And I'll pull up here one message that I recently received, which was for a startup that was looking, essentially just looking for advice. And I love the message that they sent across, and I ultimately took the startup on as an advisor, because I really loved how one of the founders reached out to me, and I'll read it to you. So he said, "Hey Chris, a friend and I built a no-code 2D game engine that now has around 40K monthly users and 320 paying members. We want to take it to the next level and turn it into the Roblox for 4D. Would love to get your feedback on how we could make that happen. Hope we can connect." And that was a really friendly outreach message. It hit on what are they building, some of the traction that they already have, what's their vision, and the ask wasn't, we'd love for you to invest. The ask was, we'd love to get your feedback. Your opinion matters to us, is what that basically read to me.
Right.
Your opinion matters to us. Would you be willing to share it? Could you take a look and share your opinion with us? And then
And that was direct email, or that was through
that
LinkedIn?
was a LinkedIn,
Okay.
completely cold.
Okay.
Completely cold message on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
This was back in May, and we've been on multiple phone calls since then. We just had an hour-plus call yesterday. I've been introducing them to investors, reviewing their pitch deck. Just as much as I can, being a sounding board to the two founders. And it was just based on that message. And he said, he wrote, "Hey Chris," and then he put the wave emoji, waving at me, "Hey Chris." And it's like that. I'm not saying that that's the right tone or messaging for every founder, but it felt very genuine for that specific founder, right? I really felt like that's who he is. And when we got on a Zoom call, that's exactly who he was. And I just thought, this is great.
Right.
The people behind it are great. What they're building is great. The traction they have is great. I think I can be at least a tiny, tiny bit helpful. And, and the rest is, now an early history in terms of having started to work with them a few weeks back. So that's just one example. But of course, reaching out via an introduction is great. If it's through a friend, as I mentioned, that just came through this morning. And by the way, I have a call in 4 minutes that I do need to get to, but
No
maybe
worries.
we can cut. I'll have to.
We'll have to have you
in.
back on again soon.
Yeah. So and so for me, the mindset between investing time and investing capital is really similar. I think our time is just as valuable as our money,
Right.
Arguably more valuable,
If not more
because
so,
time
exactly.
we can't get back, as they say, right? The clock just keeps on ticking.
Yep.
You can make more money in most cases, but time is an absolutely precious good. And so for me, the thinking is similar, and sometimes the startups already steer the conversation in one direction. They say, we'd love to have you as an advisor, and if it makes sense in the same way that I look at a startup that I would invest capital into, I might say yes. And in some cases, it's very clear that they'd like me to be an investor. And again, if it makes sense based on also how I look at something where I invest my time, I might decide to invest in capital.
Right.
But it's people, product, it's traction, it's my belief, which again is super subjective, around what is this an opportunity that I believe in, and then even if I invest time or capital, can I be helpful? That's and there's more that goes into it. Where are they based? How much are they raising? What kind of value? There's the nitty gritty deal details. But those are a few things that I look into, and people absolutely is number one.
Well, I know you got to run. We'll talk about some of those next time we get on. And I know there's like fashion and music and entertainment, and there's all this crossover right now that's happening, which is a lot of fun too, right? Like when you look at what you want to invest in, sometimes it's, well, I have an opportunity to invest in things that I want to invest in now. And there's this over here, which is kind of like, wow, it's necessary, right? Maybe it's infrastructure, which is extremely important. But again, it's not super exciting and fun. Fashion, entertainment, music, which I know are some of the things you're interested in, are all super exciting. Chris, man, thank you. I really appreciate your time. It's good to finally meet you.
Likewise, Tommy. Likewise.
And I wanted to let you know that Patrick said hello from eFuse, and I saw that you're on with Aaron the other day.
PK.
So we'll catch up soon. Thank you again, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me, Tommy. This was fun.
I'd like to thank Chris for sharing his time, experience, and knowledge with us today. His enthusiasm for the industry and desire to build impactful and sustainable businesses from the ground up are the stuff of true entrepreneurship. He's so grounded and thoughtful in his approach to investing, and his unwavering commitment to people first and founders first are great for the industry. I find myself cheering for him and the companies he is backing, and there's a lot to cheer. You can listen to Chris again now, and you can also find timestamped segments of the show, links to his social pages, and more information about his company projects and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our discussion, please let us know. Continue the conversation with me across all social platforms, and become a part of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing at ultimategamer.com. We release a new show every day of the week, Monday through Friday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests, and or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear from some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like mental health performance coach from Unleash the Athlete, James Leaf, head of Riot Music Group at Riot Games, Toa Dunn, and CEO of Access Replay, Ali Young, just to name a few. You can find all these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach the gaming community to spread the word and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to the Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up podcast.